But again, I'll also be happy to stick around, and you guys can even come up and explore on your own here. So, anything else?
All right. Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce David Getz. David is going to talk to us about this wonderful idea about evaluating classroom and performance setting. And when he told me about this idea, I was so excited. I had to talk to him and I had to convince him to come here and do this presentation. So without further ado, please, David.
Thank you very much. Dr. Zawa and I, we go way back. When I was probably a freshman or sophomore in high school, I believe is when we first became acquainted. We've kept up a good professional partnership over the years, and it's really fun now to be here, and you have a lovely hall here. It's fun to be here. I have given this presentation now at several professional development conferences, IMEC the last couple years. I've also spoken through some webinars. I've hosted my own kind of private webinars for educators on this subject. Later this month, I'm actually going to be going to Ames in Iowa to do their Iowa Music Educators Conference. And everywhere I've gone, this topic has been met with a lot of enthusiasm, and so I'm excited to share it with you today. I will give you guys a little background here, just a bit about me. I teach in Morton, Illinois, which is right in the middle of the state, about 90 minutes drive from here. That's actually my alma mater, so I went to Morton High School, came right back and taught at Morton High School. My unique piece of trivia is that I've taught 4 of my younger siblings in my class. They've been in my students. I'm also the conductor of the Central Illinois Youth Symphony. Last year was my first season, but I've been with that organization since 2017. And in 2012, I also started and direct what's called the Composers Guild. It's a club for student composers. I'm going to talk a lot about composition here in a little bit, but through that, I actually wrote my first book in 2022 called Unlocking Student Creativity Through Composition. It's published through F-Flat Books, which is a kind of a startup music education only publishing house based in Pennsylvania. And so I got connected with them during my master's work at ISU. It's been really good to work with them as well. As a composer, I've been dabbling my whole life just with writing music. I write a lot for my ensembles. My big project is my own original musical, premiered in 2018, and we actually just did it again this last July with an expanded orchestration. I just enjoy creating in any way I can, especially for my students. But the main reason actually how this presentation came to be is actually not because of my music background, but because of my background in athletics. And I've been an athlete my whole life. I've been a coach for 11 years in distance running and track and field. And I kind of took what I was doing as a coach and brought it into the classroom. And that's kind of been the genesis of a lot of this. Since I am at the School of Music, I did think it was appropriate to do a little music here to begin my presentation. And just to show you that this has kind of always been a fascination of mine, this is one of my very first compositions. My mom framed it. We sent it into a magazine. It was back in the days when you could submit something and then maybe publish it. It didn't get published, but this is kind of where it all started. She actually wrote, apparently I was 11 when I wrote this 4th of July Carousel Waltz, which I'll now play for you today. So as you can see, that was something that was always in the works. Obviously, as I became more well-trained in music, you really wanted to study theory and counterpoint and learn how to compose from the masters. So in my senior year at Illinois Wesleyan, getting my undergrad, I actually composed and premiered my own piano sonata for my senior recital. So I'm going to play for you the exposition from my piano sonata number 1 in G minor. what I'm presenting today. I've always enjoyed taking what I enjoy learning and making my own version of it. And now as an orchestra teacher for 12 years, I've basically taken what I enjoy doing as a coach, which was basically tracking my students. When it comes to distance running, it's very easy to track time and all these different conditions and use it to compare how my students would do against another school. And so I decided eventually that in sports, kids don't mind seeing exactly where they compare with everybody else involved in the contest. The kid who's in last in cross country knows they're last, and everybody cheers them on. And there's no shame in finishing last as long as you gave your best effort that day and you crossed the finish line. And I really saw a lot of similarities between that and music, and I saw a lot of discrepancies with how we often, students don't have that same relationship to grades. If they get an F, they feel like they're the worst, and this is who they are, and they will never get out of this. But if they get last in cross country, they say, well, I'll get faster in the next race. And so I've been trying to build that same kind of environment and a culture in my orchestra program. So what I'm doing today, obviously the subtitle of this presentation was a revolution. But this isn't a revolution like in Les Mis. I'm not trying to just tear down the system and the institutions. I want to think of this more as a soft opening of a restaurant. I'm going to offer you guys a meal today that if you enjoy it, I hope you come back, or I hope you want to take what you experienced today and say, how can we build on this and make something better? We're going to play a quick little game here. Again, since I love sports, oftentimes when you're watching a sporting contest, you might see something like this come up on the screen, where they give you a number and a very specific niche reason for that number. And if you don't know the sport, you might have no idea if those stats, 91, 85, 77, are any good, right? You might say, well, Nikola Jokic got an A, Kobe Bryant got a B, Ray Allen got a C. But is that what that stat is talking about? Well, not necessarily. You have to know all the context, and you have to know if that number is a good number in this situation, or if it's a bad number in this situation. And so here's the game we're going to play. I pulled up 4 very unique sports stats. For example, this outfielder on the Texas Rangers had an average exit velocity of 83.1. This punter in the NFL punted for 5,209 yards. This basketball player had a player efficiency rating of -9.9, and this football team had 483 yards after contact. So my question for you is, which one of these was the best? The other 3 were the worst. So by a show of fingers, 1, 2, 3, or 4, who do you think was the best in their category? Well, the other 3 were the worst in their category. Any thoughts? Just vote with your finger, which one do you think? Well, the best, the person that led their league in that stat was our punter. And that was the punter. So the other 3 were the worst in their stat. Now, you all looked at that and didn't have an immediate answer. You didn't know, because that number did not really mean anything to you. You didn't have a context or a frame of reference. So let's simplify the playing field and use sports again, but use the same stat. Wins. Every team wants to win, right? So I went to the year 1997, and here's 4 different teams in 4 different leagues. The Oakland A's, a baseball team, won 65 games. The Tottenham Football Club, across the pond, had 13 wins. The Minnesota Timberwolves in the NBA had 40 wins, and the Tennessee Lady Volunteers college basketball team had 39. So now here we have the same stat. Which one of these was the best? Well, you'd probably say Oakland, but Oakland was actually the worst team this year, because it was the Tennessee Lady Volunteers. So even when using the same metric, you have to know, well, how many games do they play? How long is their season? How many teams are in their league? So even when we use the same stat to compare, we still run into problems of trying to compare one thing from another. So when a student is looking at their report card and they're seeing a 65 in math, a 97 in social studies, a 76 in science, they don't really have an accurate depiction of what they who they are as a person. They have a bunch of numbers that they think they know what it means, but there's still so much subjectivity between how teachers grade, how many kids were in that class, you know, what was going on at home. All these things factor into what actually helps a student understand their progress. So this is my thesis today, is that numbers, whether they're stats or grades, only matter if they mean the same thing to the student, the teacher, the parent, and the community. So as an orchestras teacher, if I tell Dr. Zabo that he has a 94 in orchestra, could he accurately identify what that number means to himself, to his friends, and to his parents? And my guess is no. We do not know what that means. What separates a violin player getting a 94 from a cello player getting a 96 to a bass player getting 100 who can't even play a 2-octave G major scale in tune? So if, as a teacher, I'm looking at my students and saying, I want to give them the best numbers that actually matter to them and mean the same thing to themselves, to me, and to their parents. So basically the reason why, and this I think was really put into effect by COVID, is we saw students had a very toxic relationship with grades, because once they were taken away, I thought that meant students would engage more, because they had no fear of failing. But we realized it was actually the opposite, right? So the grade was not, so I realized, well, I pretty much only use grades to manage behavior, right? You mess up an orchestra, you don't show up to a concert, that lowers your grade. Well, now that doesn't really tell me how you are as a violinist. It just tells me you're a bad teammate, right? So that's not a good standard. We also now know that grades are a main source of a student's anxiety. This is very well proven. And I actually tried, I went out and, TED Talks are a great place to get this information. I scoured TED Talks for somebody trying to defend the current grading system. There's nobody out there giving that much. But there's a lot of people out there who are there talking about the detriment of grades and what this is doing to this current generation of students. Dr. Jay Purcell from Illinois State University, who I didn't realize was even at Illinois State when I was watching his TED Talk, and since then we've emailed and it's been fun to connect with him. Alfie Kahn is another author and researcher, has a lot of resources out there talking about this. But it still does put us teachers in a little bit of a predicament because we are expected to give grades. We are expected to have accurate grade books and to give students some assessments, because that is how we determine how they learn. So in 2019, this was actually a year before COVID, I started experimenting with this statistical approach to running my orchestra. Obviously, COVID happened in 2020. That basically confirmed that I felt like I was on the right track. And so I've kind of gone all in since then. So I don't really believe in a music classroom that grades have any really relevant place in a performance-based music classroom. Just like I was not giving my runners grades after their race. Like with my runner who got last, I wasn't like, well, that was an F- today. You got last place in the race. That would have crushed them. But instead saying, hey, you did 45 seconds better than you did last year on this course. Or you were this much closer to your friend today, and you're clearly getting better. So being able to celebrate those things as opposed to just immediately giving a number or a grade to them that really doesn't matter or have any significance. So for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to kind of just show you a little bit of my kind of what I've developed. And again, I'll try to go pretty briefly through this, and then if you want to stick around, I can obviously show you more in depth, or you can ask questions. But what I tell my students from day one is that they are in charge of their grade. So in my orchestra, I tell them right up front, your grade is a barometer of your commitment to this team. And we say orchestra is a team, it's not a class, because how students act in orchestra affects the people sitting around them. So if you bomb a math test, that doesn't affect anybody else's grade but your own. But if you come to class and you're playing in the key of C major and everybody else in the key of D major, because you don't know how to read the key, you're affecting everybody else around you. So we talk about orchestra being a team. So they are going to be in charge of their grade, which is going to determine their teamwork norms and accountability, but I'm going to be in charge of their progress. And I'm going to give them a lot of statistical analysis and visual representation of how they're growing as a musician. So basically the three things that I encourage teachers to do if you're interested in the strategy is to, one, decide on what metrics matter to you and your because I know every program is going to be a little differently. What is important to me might not be as important to another orchestra teacher, even in the same area. But then once you figure out figure out how to collect it or score it and how to creatively report it. If a student sees something that looks like a report card, they will treat it like a report card. If they see something that doesn't look like a report card, they will treat it as you want them to treat it. So what I decided, the three things that I have been tracking now for my students since 2019 are their musicianship in the form of a playing exam. Now this is still subjective because it's my opinion, but I'm the only one giving the score, so from that standpoint it's subjective. I'm not averaging a bunch of other people's opinions. I track their pitch reading, how quickly their brains are reading notes on a staff. We talked about how this is not the end-all be-all of music literacy, but it's very important to get a bunch of 16-year-olds to play the right note at the right time. You kind of have to be able to read a score and follow apart. And then I also track what I call rhythm audiation. And this is how fast their brains can process rhythm and speak it in real time. I'll show you how I developed that as well. So this is kind of what students often see in my class. They'll come into class sometimes. I usually have a lot of, if we're in a data collection unit, they're usually seeing a lot of this stuff up on the stage or up on my screen. And they know I'm always giving them, usually when I give them the score, I'm also giving them the class average and where they rank in the class. Because again, students don't mind being last if they know it's not an F. So if they know, oh, I'm in the lower percentile, that encourages them to say, well, now I know what numbers I need to hit to try to move up, move up my place. Just to talk about this, when it talks here about having beginner or advanced level skills, I do all of my work in Google Sheets. This is basically a spreadsheet in Google spreadsheet software. I learned all this from my days of being a cross-country coach, because again, I would go online, I would find all these times of all these runners all over Illinois had run, and I would aggregate them, I would sort them, I would filter them, I would do all these fun things with them, because I wanted to give that data to my students in a way that would matter to them. Again, a 14-year-old doesn't want to look at a huge database. They want to say, hey, can you boil this down into something that I can understand? Who are the runners I need to catch? What time do I need to hit? So I learned a lot of those tricks, and again, there's some that are very beginner level, but there's a lot that are more advanced and take a little bit of time to figure out. So here's basically how I collect my musicianship scores. I give them intonation, a rhythm, and a musicianship score all out of 4 points. And what I tell them is, a 1 means what I expect a freshman to be able to do, a 2 means what I expect a sophomore to be able to do, and 3 is a junior, and 4 would be a senior to whom I cannot give any further feedback outside of like a private lesson. So again, when a freshman comes in, what they think, I need to get 100%, because that's what they're taught in school, right? I need to get the best score. And what I tell them is, you should be very happy if you get a 1. Even if you do everything right, I'm probably going to give you a 1, because you sound like a freshman violinist. You don't sound like a senior violinist. So if you get a 1, that doesn't mean you now have a 25% in my class. That means you did perfect for how I expect you to do as a freshman violin player. Now again, it takes them a while to reorient their thinking around this, because as soon as they see they didn't get all the points, they think, I've failed, or I have not met the expectation. But that's again because we've created this idea that 100% is the expectation in all these categories. When if you understand sports, a 100 is not always a good mark of what's good. You have to know the sport, you have to know the stat, and you have to know the context. As you can see here, again, freshmen are typically scoring in the 1 to 2s, sophomores in the 2s to 3s, and juniors and seniors. So you can see there's usually the biggest jump from their freshman to their sophomore year, and then it kind of trails off, because this is, again, when students come into my system, they usually make a big jump, and then after that, they have to decide, as most teenagers do, how hard do I want to work at this to keep seeing that improvement. So here's what this looks like laid out. So I can go to, now these names I all substituted with 1920s baseball players, so these aren't actually my students. But here I can come down and I can see Charlie Ferguson. This is basically where he scored in each of his playing quizzes and the pink bar is the class average for that grading session. So you can see he had 2 where he was kind of in the upper percentile. His sophomore year, he had a really good score, and then he didn't do so hot, and then he did good. So, and he can see this because this automatically updates every single year. So it builds, and so by the time he gets to his, senior year, this will all be populated, and we'll have a snapshot of his entire career. So I can go to any other person here. Again, these people don't have as much data. But this, I can go, all of my students are in this, so I can just go pick any student, and again, I don't know whose names these are actually attached to, but they're all going to get this same kind of comparison. And at the end of every year, we always sit down and I pull this up, and we talk through basically say, hey, what are your goals for next year? What do you want to try to hit? What do we need to do to hit those? So then, let's go to note reading. Note reading, I use the website musictheory.net. If you're familiar with this, it's just a really easy, free quiz generator. This is all based off of how many pitches they can identify on their iPad in 60 seconds. So again, I have this nice little heat map that they can see, where basically this is the range of correct notes in 60 seconds, and where each class should expect most of them to hit. So you can see most of my freshmen, 50% of my freshmen, are going to be in the 10 to 30 range. Whereas opposed to 50% of my sophomores are now in the 20 to 40, and you see, it gets thicker and thicker as you move across the 4 years of high school. Only 0.6% of my freshmen are reading 60 plus for a minute, as opposed to, look at this, about 40% of my upperclassmen are. So what this again shows a student who comes in as a freshman and says, gosh, I can only read 10 notes a minute. Well, it's like, well, actually, that's not that bad. And they might look at that initially and say, oh, I should be getting 60. That's what apparently it's like, no, this is actually perfect for where you should be. And you can also see if you just stick with this, you're probably going to just move over. Only 1% of my seniors are still in this range, because they're just getting better by being in the program. You can also see I don't teach this throughout the year, but just by the fact that I've been keeping track, look at our progress as a class over the last 5 years. So I'm not doing any more time spent on actually teaching them note reading. I'm just telling them, hey, every year I'm going to keep track of what you can do, and those numbers motivate them to improve. And then lastly, this is just I call this the nerd alert, because what I do for this is what the computer actually tracks is not, well, it tracks how much they can do, but it also tracks their consecutivity. So the goal is that they actually do this test 10 straight days, and the computer keeps track of what day they're on and moves them over, and it automatically updates. So I don't have to go in and say, hey, did you do day 5, or are you on day 4? The computer automatically just moves them over, and once they get to 10, they know they're done. So again, it's much less work for me to actually police it, because it's all set up in Google Forms. So every day that they do the Google form, it just moves them over a box, and then I don't have to worry about it. And then this is the last one I'll talk about here, then we'll kind of wrap up. This is the rhythm audiation. So this is going into Sight Reading Factory, if you're familiar with that. You can basically program a 4-bar rhythm that randomly generates on the click of a button. Each level usually introduces a new rhythmic component. And what I do is I start a metronome. They have 4 bars, click, 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 and then they have to just audiate the rhythm they see on the screen. If they notice it says at what level did they max out, and then at what tempo did they max out. There's 6 levels, and at each level I have them do a slow tempo and a fast tempo. So you can see here Frank Fernandez maxed out at level 2, tempo 72. Whereas Ed Fernandez maxed out at level 4, tempo 72. So that's the last level they were able to do successfully before they made a mistake. So that basically helps me know at what speed is their brain processing rhythm. Because we know when it comes to sight reading, chances are their pitch, and actually studies show 80% of students read pitch first. Music is a rhythmic art. So if you're actually reading pitch first, you're always a few picoseconds late, if you're not thinking about the note's duration. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to speed up their rhythmic audiation so they're actually hearing the rhythm in their brain before they're actually putting the fingers down for their pitches. And what's interesting is I have two orchestras. We call it the concert orchestra, the symphonic orchestra. Concert orchestra is primarily my underclassmen and my less experienced players. My symphonic orchestra is my more experienced players, mostly upperclassmen. And what you can see here is there's a clear shift between just the speed at which symphonic orchestra is reading music. I mean, they're actually reading physically faster, and I can see that by the data that I've been tracking. So when a freshman comes in and wants to be in the symphonic orchestra, and they're not even able to get past level 2, well, now I can tell them, it's not that I don't like you, it's just that you're not reading notes, you're going to be left behind. Like, everybody in this class is reading the music faster. It would be better for you to be in concert orchestra where you can build on this skill to try to get up to a certain level. Again, the last part here is just basically all these processes now are all automated. So pretty much I have all these set up at the beginning of the year. So students are doing most of all this work on Google Forms, where I'm just inputting data into Google Sheets that I've already prepared. The time this has saved me is astronomical. And it allows me then to focus on conducting, just building relationships with kids, creative, building more and more creative things that I can do. Just like I'm always going to probably be composing stuff on the piano, I'm always going to be making new stuff in my classes. And this is the last one I'll kind of show you here. This is the audition form. That all I have to do when they come in to do their playing exams is I just write all their stuff in here. So, Sal Fasano comes in, I give him a 3 in intonation, I give him a 3 in rhythm, I give him a 2.8 in musicianship, I write in a few comments right here, and then I press one button, and the computer reads down that entire database, puts every student's name in this format, pulls in their data, puts it in the correct box based on the number, pulls my comments down here, sends it to their email address, copied to me and their parents, and I can grade 75 students by clicking one button and getting all that reported out. And now it looks the way it looks cool. This is something that students will actually show each other. How often do students show each other their tests? No, but when they know this is not tied to their grade, this is not tied to who they are, this is a work in progress, it's something that they're proud of and it looks cool. We'll save that for another time. So I'll leave you guys with this story, and then if you have any questions, you can ask me or feel free to come and look into this. But in 2019, when I was first starting this venture, my wife and I went to northern Spain in the Basque Country. Have anyone been there? Yeah. That region? It's a fascinating region. Barcelona? Well, Barcelona's in the south. This is in the far north. Yeah. Victoria. Yeah. And then in this museum, it's a whaling industry. Back in the 1500s, they would travel literally over to Canada, because that's kind of where the whales were, and they would, get the whales, they'd bring them back to Spain, and so they had these huge ships, and they obviously, the more oil they could put in the barrels and send back to Spain, the more money they had. So it behooved them to have a very wide ship that could support a lot of this cargo. Well, in this museum, they're trying to recreate one of these boats using the technology of the 1500s. They're not using modern technology to build this boat. And they said it's so difficult because it's so hard to get wood that's this big and this wide and that they can cut it into the shapes. And they said, how did they build so many boats like this? Well, here's how they did it. They would build these oak groves, and when the trees were really small, like knee-high, they would put braces on the branches. And for the next 60, 70, 80 years, the tree would grow in the shape of the boat. And then they would cut down 12 trees at a time, trim the branches, and they had a boat ready to go. What fascinates me about that story is, think how that would go over on Shark Tank. You'd say, I have a great idea for my grandkids' generation. America would never go for this, because this is that's so long-term, we're not going to see any benefit from this you know, you're going to be dead long before the first boat is built. But it's putting a system in place that has a purpose, that we say, this is bigger than what I'm doing. This is going to help my community. This is going to help the next generation. This is something that is we need to invest in this. When I think about just education and as being a teacher, I think of myself as a boat builder. It's my job to set the culture, to set a system in place that's going to benefit my students, and maybe I'm not even going to see the benefit from it for a year. For like in 2019, I didn't see any benefit from that. 7 years later now, I'm getting out here talking to more teachers, and they're saying this is valuable. This is something that has benefit for the field of education. And I wasn't even trying to, I did this on accident. So imagine if you're a young teacher, or you're starting out, like, you can build a system that will have this benefit not only for the immediate future, but for lots and lots of people down the road. So that is all I had prepared today. If you guys do have any questions, I have a website. You can reach out to me at email. Every once in a while I post on Instagram, not the best place to find me. But I really appreciate you guys being here today, and thank you very much. Yeah. Do you have any questions I can answer?
I do.
Yeah.
So I have an elementary background,
Okay.
music background, so I'm seeing that a lot of kids have such different achievement levels. So in your orchestra, do you give the same task to everybody, or do you like do enrichment tasks for something different? Because of course
Yeah.
there may be students who are just like high achieving students, like who can just do everything, whereas there might be students who are struggling, like even reading the notation, trying to like transfer to instruments. So I'm just kind of, because you know, elementary setting is just such
Yes.
a big
Mhm.
gaps.
Yeah, so like when it comes to like my musicianship, like the musicianship score here, like this stuff, am I giving the same test for those? Yeah, so usually that's coming from our concert repertoire. So it's one of those where it's like, okay, violins need to play, you know, these 15 measures, and so, because that is what, when it comes to data, you have to have some sort of comparison, right? Otherwise you get into those funny sports things where it's like, well, if I'm giving everybody a different test, that kind of destroys the purpose of the number. But again, what I tell students is, if one student gets a 3 and you get a 1, that does not mean that student was 3 times better than you, right? This number is a lifelong, like, this number is going to grow with you. You know, like Dutch here, I only have 3 pieces of data on him, and he's, you know, he gets to write the rest of the story, right? And so I think that's what students see with this, is that they are in charge of that progress. That's where I say, like, they're in charge of their grade. I'm going to be in charge of showing them their progress, so that every year they know, okay, I'm going to have my meeting again with Mr. Getz. And the other thing is, I save this as a PDF, and every one of my students has a Google slide that's shared with just me and them, and I put that in their Google slide. So at any point, they can always go reference this. They have access to this. They can show their parents. So I try to make that as transparent as possible, so that they're able to see and build on that.
I mean, I really love the idea of seeing their progresses. I mean, that's what the education is for, not the summative assessment, but like, how am I improving from last year? And they're actually seeing that data. I mean, it's a daunting task. I could see that from your part, right?
Yes.
It's a system, right? Another question that I had was, you know how most often music teachers have parent-teacher conference and nobody comes to the classroom because they think that the grade doesn't,
Yeah.
the music doesn't mean anything to my kids' education. So how do you deal with that situation? Because of course, if they know that the grade in music is going to affect their entire grade, they're going to get more interested, like the parents, right? How do you like navigate?
Yeah, so this is interesting, and I'm sure every district is different. I mean, even going back to when I you know, was giving traditional grades, my parents didn't care at all. And I realized my students didn't really care at all either. Because I think once a student has accepted that they're a C student, because that's what they get in other classes, what's the big deal if they got a C in orchestra? You know? So, and they're also like, well, that's who I am. I get C's. And so, you know, a student wouldn't turn in something, and then I would say, oh, your grade gets lowered. Well, it didn't change the behavior because, it's not giving them a consequence that actually matters to the team. So actually I didn't get into this in the presentation, but now I have what's called concert probation. So if a student doesn't turn in something, not only does their grade get lowered, but they get put on concert probation. And if they don't get off concert probation, I have this formalized too, then they don't play in the next concert. And again, I look at that like, if I tell every violin player, turn this in on Tuesday, and 2 people don't do it, how is that different than a football coach saying, everybody give me 2 laps, and 2 kids just sit down and say, not going to do that. Are they going to play on Friday? No. And nobody would fault the coach for it. So I was just like, why should I put you on stage with your friends when all I did was that I didn't, and again, like, even if you did bad on that quiz, I'm not going to lower your grade. You're just going to get a poor score. But the fact that you're just not doing it, like, you're not going to be a part of the team then. And that's what I'm trying to build with the kids being a part of an orchestra, is like, this isn't about just you. Music is a community thing. And if you're going to be in an ensemble, the viola's job is to play an F sharp and measure 17. So if I can't trust you to turn in an assignment, I'm also probably not going to trust you to play your part right, and your friends shouldn't either. And so the amount of assignments that have gone not turned in, it hardly ever happens anymore.
Wow.
Because students, they don't want that. They don't want to be held out of the game. That's what matters to them, not the grade.
Right.
The grade doesn't matter.
Performance is what they're there for, right? Like they want to perform on the stage and they want to have their
Yes.
community experience.
And so they'll be like, okay, fine, lower my grade, because the grade doesn't matter. So it's like, okay, if the grade doesn't matter, the performance matters, and that's changed way more behavior.
I think your reference to sports is the key, because that's what everybody understands.
Yeah.
And then making that comparison is just a big selling point.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Could you walk us through again how you enter your data? Like what kind of actual things you give them based on, or maybe I just missed it. When you give them like clear assignments and then you entering those in the stats, or?
So, like, this is what we call our shuttle run, and this is actually going on right now, so I have the names edited out. But like, what they see is, it'll be easier if I just do this. So like right now, this is what every day when the kids come in, they see my orchestra slide. So all this information here, what the internet might be. Let's go to this one. But like when they come in, this is what they would see. Let's see if it comes up here. Oh, this is their names right now. But like right now, I can see these are all the students who have done the shuttle run. We call this the shuttle run. No reason shuttle run. Again, sports reference. But then they can see this, the year-to-year chart. They can see how the scores are all being distributed. They can see who's got the best scores right now. But I also put here the average increase, so they can see right now, on average, everybody in class is improving by 25% since we've started this. That's across the board. But then when they see, this is what they actually do, is this sets up what they do. They go into this, like if they're a viola player, a violin player, maybe they're a junior, so they have to play this level. This is the challenge. And then as soon as that's done, they click here to report their score. They put in what level they did, they put in how many they got right, and then that all comes, and I see it over here. So, but again, I don't even have to go in and check this anymore, because I've built in like something like this, where every time a student does it, it's just telling me, okay, they filled out the form that day. Yeah?
What were the challenges when you first implemented this type of assessment procedure to your students? Because I'm thinking about my college students
Yeah.
who are going to be ensemble directors, and this is great. Like I wanted to do like accurate data assessment and have statistics, not just for fun, but it's actually learning something, you progress every year. So like to build that kind of culture, the great culture that you have established in your classroom, like what were the challenges at first when you first implemented?
The challenges were to get kids literally shaken out of academic expectations. Because they are so trained to come into a class, and what everybody does, when you hand out an assignment, the first question is this for a grade? Second question, how much is it worth? Which translates to, do I have to do it? How hard do I try? That's what they're thinking, right? And we all do this too. Like when you're, a boss gives you a thing, and you say, okay, how much time is this going to take me? And how hard do I have to try before I get dinged that oh, you didn't put in very much work? So we all do this. That's why I said I don't have a problem. That's why at the beginning I said this is like a soft open of a restaurant. I don't want to just like tear down everything we're doing and say everything we're doing is awful, because there's a lot of the structure that is beneficial. But there's also some toxic things in there. And I think what we can do is say, okay, can we, and this is where, being a coach, I was saying, okay, how is it that in sports, we track everything these students are doing? Like on basketball, you get rebound, everything that happens, you see the adult search, they're calculating the stat that and the kids want these stats. Like they want the stats because they know to get to the next level. If I want to play in college, I have to score this many points, or I have to run this time. So they're very driven by these numbers, but they're perfectly fine with them being public information. So because they know I'm on display. Like this is a game. People are paying to come to the game. So that's why I look at music. Like we're giving a concert. Like you should want to say, I want to be as good at this as possible. And a grade in the grade book is not what is motivating them to improve. And what I think I said this to one administrator, or maybe it was in another conference, because a lot of the pushback is, what do the administrators say about this, right? And I'm fortunate enough to work in a district that allows me to be here today presenting. They're encouraging that. Most administrators, as long as my students are giving concerts and the parents are happy, they're happy. Because again, no assistant principal knows how to judge the intonation of a G chromatic scale, right? I've even had administrators observe me in class and at the end be like, so tell me what you did up there. And I could just make stuff up. I could be like, oh yeah, we just played the quadratic formula of pi. And they'd be like, it sounds good, yeah, we're really good. Like, what they're concerned about is behavior management and concert participation. So what I basically said was, I'll see your expectations and I'll raise you, and I'm actually going to give you stuff that shows all my students are improving. We got it, and I'm sacrificing rehearsal days to do this. 4 years ago, my ensemble got to play at IMAC. So less rehearsals led to the highest place that a high school can play. So when I say yeah, you don't need to rehearse more with your ensemble, what I think got us there was you're always going to have the 10% of your students in your class that are rock stars and they're going to practice and take lessons. You're also going to probably have 10% that you still can't figure out why they're still playing as an 18-year-old when they seem to hate it. Their behavior problem. And then you have 80% in the middle that you want to just push this way. And so that's what the stats do. They give that 80% something to chase. And it gives that 10%. Now I can say, hey, look, you're a senior, you're still reading at the very bottom. So it levels the playing field, and then their performance is not immediately tied to what they're seeing on the report card. So I think that was the biggest, your question was what was the challenges? That was the challenge, was to change the whole culture, and it really took, I'd say 4 years. Because because by the time that first class was seniors, that's all they'd known in my class. So then they were able to tell the freshmen, hey, this is fun. So then I didn't have to do as much of the culture shaping because I had enough role models in the class who are mentoring that for the younger ones. But that first year was, I mean, anytime you do a big change, you're going to have that initiation energy that you have to overcome. And I would say lastly to that is part of what probably helped me was my students see me doing creative stuff all the time. And I think that's a big part of it, is they see me writing songs, they see me putting on musicals in the community, they see me making these crazy spreadsheets. So it wasn't abnormal to be like, oh, Mr. Getz just made one more. You know, like, it's like, so, I mean, 2 years ago, my seniors actually made me they went online and got like this spreadsheet collage painting of them. And like now it's up in the room because they're always making fun of me for making spreadsheets. So, yeah, does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I agree that, you know, when you're in a new setting, the old group still has the kind of traditional mindset. I don't want anything to change, right? It's kind of scary. But when you start with a new group and when they grow up to the seniors, then it's kind of the culture is built in. So.
And that's why I love the story of the tree, is that the trees aren't, a new tree is not going to build a boat. You have to put it in a system where it will grow into the boat you want it to be. And that's, you know, taken years for me to do, but I'm very glad I put in the time.
When you share this presentation at conferences, how do ensemble directors respond to, I mean, you were received well, but like, you know, do you think they would, did they reach out to you about you?
Yeah, so this year I actually have my first online client.
Oh, wow.
She's a choir director up in the suburbs, and we've gotten, you know, we just have a Google Meet. I basically set up some of these spreadsheets for her to use, and now she's populating them with her class data. And when she runs into a problem, she reaches out, we schedule another session, I can help her with stuff, but she's already saying how it's changing her daily teaching. I mean, this is her first semester, so I think she's in that phase of trying this out in experimentation, but you know, for me, I learned the data skills in another venue, and I think when I look at like my music education, I didn't get any of this. There's none of that, and so I realized like, okay, if I don't go out and at least present this, because again, to go to a dean and say, hey, could we have a whole unit in our education curriculum on spreadsheet mapping? They'd be like, well, what does that have to do with music education? You'd have to have, but now like I have something in place to say, yes, this matters, you know, but if you don't have those artifacts, it's very hard to justify just saying, well, we're going to take, you know, 4 weeks and teach you all this spreadsheet coding. So I get that it's if you didn't grow up with the skills, it's hard to just immediately say, well, I'm just going to build this huge thing. So yeah, it does take that, but I'm glad at least I had the wherewithal to say maybe what I'm doing in this other discipline can affect what I'm doing in my classroom. So.
Did you think about doing like a perhaps simplified version of it, which is like higher level, like studio teaching kind of ways, where you have perhaps a little more like clear type criteria, like making spreadsheets like that, which automatically creates like a.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I learned a lot of what I did too. I mean, there's people on YouTube that are doing, you know, I learned a lot just by watching YouTube videos, reading blog posts, you know, but you have to be willing to put up with there's an intimidation level of like, okay, these guys are doing these spreadsheets for like Fortune 500 companies and in the financial industry. Like I have a cousin who works in HR in San Francisco, and I showed him what I was doing, and he basically said like, who taught you how to be a business analyst? And I was like, well, nobody. He's like that's what business analysts are doing. So it's just one of those, I think that, you know, in education, we're not thinking maybe these skills can impact what we're doing. But for me, the big piece is, again, coming out of COVID, seeing how toxic, I would say, grades were in my class and what they were doing negatively to my students. It was like, I have to offer a positive alternative. So obviously, again, now if COVID hadn't happened, would I have invested this much time. I don't know, maybe. I'm pretty crazy. But that was the incident that it took for me to realize this needs a change.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So if you want to see anything more, I'll leave this up for a little bit. Because I was rushing, I didn't even get to my string instruments, but I do know how to play those as well.